Investing in Canada real estate versus the United States. Hi, I'm Phil Pustiowski. I'm a full-time real estate investor, real estate mentor and coach to many of the market-leading real estate investors all across North America. So that is the United States and Canada specifically. And in this video, I want to share with you, and this is more geared toward my friends in Canada, but also for those in the United States that are at least curious as to what the differences are between investing in Canada versus investing in the United States in real estate. And more specifically, I'm going to touch on some of the more traditional sides, but I'm going to go more into the creative as well, because that has been where we've made most of our money and has been most productive in real estate, has been focusing on the more creative techniques. Because traditional techniques, and I have great videos on the differences between the two, that's pretty simple. I mean, you're buying a property and then either you're going to rent it out or you're going to fix it up and resell it, and there's not a whole lot of creativity required. But for the majority of how we invest, we like to focus on targeting motivated sellers, people who have to get rid of their property, and then we try to come up with a creative solution, hopefully not having to put much money down or use our own credit, and then find a way to turn that deal into money. And so the first thing I want to start with for those of you in Canada is you're going to be shocked by how similar what I teach specifically. I can't vouch for everybody else that talks about real estate investing, but for what I teach, how similar it is to Canada. It's incredible how what you can obviously hear in my voice that I'm from the United States. What we traditionally do in the United States, you can do it so much in Canada, and it's because most of the laws are basically identical, whether it has to do with property rights and contract law and everything in between. So my hope in this video is that by the end you're encouraged and you say, wow, all the stuff that I've been learning from Phil, I can do this right here in my own backyard, here in Alberta, here in British Columbia, here in Ontario. All right, so let's talk about some differences. First, we have population. All right, so population. So and this is just rough estimate, you know, you get 34 million in Canada, and you've got about 300 million in the US. So already you've got just a much smaller overall population. Now, why is that important? Well, when we're focusing on generating motivated seller leads, it is a function of population. And so you have to have, in my opinion, at least between 50 and 100,000 people to really become a very successful in a market area. So if you're in one of those northern territories where there's no human beings up there, that might be a little bit difficult for you to apply creative real estate investing strategies. Okay, but if you're in one of the main provinces and you've got a decent population, it'll be just fine. A main difference, and sorry if I offend anyone from the United States when I say this, but one of the main differences is I'm going to call it fiscal responsibility. Okay, so Americans have developed over time a very lackadaisical level of responsibility as it comes to finances. We have high levels of foreclosure rates. We have a lot of defaults from our tenants. Americans don't do a great job of saving money and paying their bills. They do a very bad job of that. Whereas Canadians are very fiscally responsible by comparison. Canadians save money, they pay their bills, they try to avoid debt whenever possible, whereas Americans are like, ooh, more debt, please. So this means that you're less likely to get any great opportunities in Canada from things like foreclosures or short sales. I mean, that is so minor, so tiny, almost not even want to talk about it. To go even further, I mean, first of all, the way the Canadian banking system works is a lot different. Basically, 90% of all mortgages are controlled by the 5 major banks in Canada. RBC, Scotiabank, you know the rest. I have a list right there. I don't know all 5 off the top of my head. And so what ends up happening is they have much more stringent underwriting guidelines, and so they create loans that people can afford. And this is kind of cool. Those in the United States would find this fascinating. United States, we have 30-year fixed rate loans. They're 30-year amortized loans, and the interest rate stays fixed for 30 years. That doesn't work that way in Canada. They may have it on a 30-year amortized loan schedule, but after 5 years, the loan adjusts. They have ARM loans, and so that in and of itself just proves that obviously when the underwriters are looking at loans in Canada, that they're evaluating what's this person going to do 5 years from now and once it adjusts. So much more responsible in the payment from the fiscal responsibility side for the actual borrower, but then from the lender side, they're also very responsible in who they lend money to. There's a lot less of the subsidies like we have in the U.S. We have like the FHA, where they allow 3.5% down payment for first-time home buyers and FHA borrowers, and those things don't exist in Canada. So it means that people have to have a real down payment, and they have to really be able to make money, and they have to be able to show their income on a loan statement and those sorts of things. All right, so I've hit that pretty hard, but you get that. So foreclosures, short sales, not really a part of the overall investing strategy in Canada. Tax deed sales, those things don't really exist either. Obviously, sometimes people don't pay their taxes, but definitely it's just so much smaller. That's not where the opportunity is. You know, the opportunity is in targeting motivated sellers, but not the ones that are motivated by foreclosure, short sale, or tax sale. You know, that's not where it's done. And I tell you, a lot of what we do in the U.S. doesn't evolve around this either, believe it or not. I mean, yes, we have our short sales, and yes, these foreclosures do roll through, but by and large, we're targeting the sellers of property that just need to get out. Maybe it's an inheritance, maybe they just own it a while, they just want to get rid of it, whatever the case may be. Okay, so Canadians were fiscally responsible. There's obviously just a far smaller population. What's shocking is how many creative techniques you can do in Canada. Yes, you can do subject twos. Yes, you can do lease options. Yes, you can do flips. Yes, 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 you can. Anybody who tells you you can't obviously doesn't know the law. I'll tell you what I love about what they can do in Canada that you can't do in the United States. And I may have run out of room, so I'm gonna erase this, but you get that lesson right there. I'll tell you what I absolutely love. Flips. When you flip the deal. Because what you can do in Canada, which is really cool, it's called a skip transfer. Skip transfer. All right, so a little background. In the United States, we have something called a deed. And we have a quitclaim deed, we have a warranty deed. In California, we have a grant deed, and there's a bargain and sale deed, which is kind of in between a quitclaim and a warranty, and all these deeds, right? Doesn't work that way in Canada. Canada has either a Form A transfer or they have a court-ordered transfer. So they're just transferring title. There's only one way to do it. And anytime you transfer title in Canada, you're paying transfer taxes. Well, you want to try to avoid transfer taxes, especially British Columbia, a very expensive transfer tax province. And so this is cool. If you're going to be buying and then selling, you know, so we use the phrase A to B and then B to C. So you're B. That's who you are in this little example as the investor. So if you're buying from the seller A and then you're reselling to the new buyer C, what ends up happening is you can do a skip transfer and go directly from here to here, not pay the transfer tax, and you get the money in the middle, and you don't have to use transactional funding, and they don't have to know how much you paid for it or how much you sold it for. It's awesome. So we don't get to do that in the United States. We have to do 2 closings, have to get transactional funding, so you've got transfer taxes, you've got the transactional funding fees. So actually, Canada has a huge benefit when it comes to flips because you don't have all the expenses. It still means you've got to get the deal under contract and then resell the property and find a new buyer, but it avoids a lot of the expenses. I love that. Okay, a drawback to Canada is legal entities. Legal entities is a bit of a drawback. In the United States, we have something called an LLC. And limited liability company works great for real estate investors. It can be taxed as a sole proprietorship, as a partnership, as an S corporation. So you get the benefit there, but it's passed through. So the income flows directly to personal. That does not happen in Canada. If you want to set up a legal entity in Canada, you have to set up a corporation, or you can do a limited partnership. but that doesn't really fit if it's just one person, right? So it's a corporation, and here's the thing, the lowest income bracket for tax income bracket for a corporation in Canada is 12%, from what I understand. And again, I'm not an accountant, but that means you're being double taxed. So if you're doing deals out of a legal entity in Canada, and in most cases you're doing a corporation, you have double taxation. You're getting taxed at the corporate level, and then whatever's left goes back to you personal, and you have to pay tax on that as well. Plus, Canada, by and large, especially for their higher income earners, has a higher tax bracket as well. Canada has really high income taxes in comparison to the United States. So what can you do here? One option is you can maybe get a what's called a general liability insurance policy from an insurance agent. You still do your investing in Canada from a personal name, but you also have that liability protection with that insurance policy. So that can play a role. So yeah, unfortunately, Canadians, you have the double taxation. So you save money here and you give it to the government there. There you go. But shockingly, outside of what I've just talked about, it's amazing how many techniques that I talk about in my videos that apply directly to Canada. Like I said, the subject to, the lease purchase, flips, all those kind of creative techniques, they all work, and you can definitely do them. Definitely want to get your contract. If you get a contract from the United States that's from a real estate investor, definitely have a local attorney there in your province go through that document and make sure that all the correct language is in there. And again, I brought up that example of a deed. In most of the contracts in the United States, we talk about how that the seller is going to provide a clear title and a warranty deed. Well, obviously in Canada you wouldn't put that in the language. And right there, I've summarized most of what plays a role in what we do in creative investing. Obviously, there are tremendous differences from other perspectives as well. One thing to keep in mind, in Canada, there wasn't much of a real estate bubble bursting. And specifically, I'm thinking of Toronto when I'm talking about this. Toronto has just boomed. In fact, right now it's kind of like California, like San Francisco or LA. Toronto, it's really high, really expensive real estate prices because they didn't have the big run up in the real estate values because they were very disciplined in their lending practices, and then the borrowers were disciplined in what they bought. Another little thing to keep in mind, in Canada there is no interest deduction for your home mortgage on your income taxes. So Canadians aren't as they're not as incentivized to have a big fat mortgage on their home loan, or on their personal residence, on their primary residence. So they're much more likely to want to pay the thing down, whereas in the United States we get an interest deduction. So coupled with low interest rates, fixed rate loan of 30 years, and an interest deduction, we United States, we Americans, we are incentivized to keep big fat home mortgages on our primary residences, whereas Canadians are not. And so they're more likely to pay it down. So it means that the deals that you work on are more likely to have equity, which can actually be a good thing, right? It can be a great thing if the thing's already got equity, so you've got more potential options. A thing I like about this is the majority of Canadian investors don't know that you can apply these techniques that we talk about here in the States. You can apply them there. They don't realize you can do things like skip transfers. They don't realize you can do subject tos, lease options, and those sorts of things. They're unaware of that. So what that means is you Canadian investors have less competition. And that's a beautiful thing. In the United States, there's plenty of competition for doing these deals, but you've got less competition in Canada. And I've always been a big fan of less competition in our business because it allows you to negotiate better deals with sellers because there's not a bunch of other people hounding that same seller. So that's a huge benefit as well. And since your real estate prices have kind of steadily, gone up, it means that from the perspective of owning a long-term rental property, you have less risk of there being a complete, just boo, like there was in the United States. Also, tenants tend to pay. Not always, there's obvious exceptions, but Canadian tenants tend to have a much better payment percentage or less of a default rate in the United States. So if you're looking at maybe owning apartment buildings or some larger residential type properties like that, that can be another benefit there in Canada, is you've got the stability of knowing that tenants tend to pay better. But on the other side, especially with apartment buildings and whatnot, you're not gonna get as much cash flow, because the value of the property is going to be a little bit higher because of the stability of the tenants there in Canada. So what's my overall assessment? I think you Canadians have a tremendous opportunity. I think you should be jumping on that opportunity. I think you should master the art of creative real estate investing and become the market leader in your area. And you'd have less competition. You'll make a killing. You can flip deals with the skip transfer and have less of a problem there. If you get the right liability insurance, then that'll solve your liability issues and not have to run all those profits through a corporation. And there you go. All right, well, I'm Phil Pustiowski with freedommentor.com. You can learn a whole lot more about me on my website, or watching a ton of these videos on my YouTube channel. I just have a treasure trove of great ideas that you can apply in your own investing. You can grab my book, How to Be a Real Estate Investor, #1 seller on Amazon. And if you'd like to work with me and my team directly and do deals together, check out my apprentice program on my website as well. Apply for that. All right, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.